Il n'y a pas une pauvre cloque sur Windows?
Okay, it's 9 a.m. I propose that we get started. Diego. Yeah, we have a pretty full agenda, so let's start right on time. So my name is Thomas Otena. Together with Pascal Thubert, we're co-chairing the 6TISCH working group. Welcome to the work group meeting. Before we get started, some important points. The first point is that this is not working. Good point.
Hey. That's the wrong PC, right? Because I changed here. It didn't move there. So.
Oh, that's better.
Yes.
Okay, so maybe you can forward.
Well, it should have
Can
done.
you zoom out?
You wanted to?
Okay, so the important message, the note well applies to this meeting and is applied to any IETF meeting. If you're aware of any IPR concerning the things that we're discussing, you need to disclose it. I recommend you familiarize yourself very well with this slide and read the documents. If you have any questions, contact the work group chair on the AD. Reminder, we're taking the minutes. The meeting is recorded. We're live broadcasted on Meetecho. I know that there's a number of people that will join remotely. Your presence is logged. And Pascal, if you could have the blue sheets go around, thank you. Administrivia, we have blue sheets going by. Please don't forget to enter your name. Scribes, Dominique and Nicola have agreed. Thank you very much. We're using the Etherpad that was on the first slide if you want to follow along. Jabber, we have Diego that agreed to be a Jabber scribe. Thank you very much. So if you're listening on, if you have any questions, just relay them and just send them on Jabber and Diego will relay.
And we've posted a mail to the mailing list, so we get, if you want the PDF, etc. Just want to look at your mail. Do you have clicks for the PDF, the PowerPoint, and all the material for this working group?
Yep. So this is the second session. We had a session on Monday, which was focused on security, and today is the bigger section. We have 2 hours and a half. And the idea is to go through the workgroup draft, including the ones in last call. We'll have a quick presentation about the plug test coming up in July. We then talk about distributed scheduling about for 30 minutes, and then we'll talk about recharging. This is the detailed agenda. First, with the status of last call, workgroup documents, other drafts. We have remote presentations from Margarita, Xavi, and Miguel Angel. Miguel Angel will present from the plug test. Diego will have a big chunk of time for on-the-fly scheduling, and then we'll end up with a lively discussion, we hope, about rechartering and adding some elements to our charter. So before we get started, any comments about this agenda? Something we're missing? Something you'd like to change? Please let us know now. Okay, so I don't hear anything. So in the minutes, let's write down that the agenda is approved for today. So the first item on the agenda is a draft called 6TISCH TSCH, which I'm happy to present. Very, very quick presentation. I assume that everybody has been reading it. This is the very first draft that we published, called Using 15.4 ETSCH in an IoT Context: Overview, Problem Statements, and Goals. So it was adopted in IETF 88 in Vancouver. The last version, number 6, was published on March 9th. And then Shepherd is Pascal Thubert. Thank you very much, Pascal, for the write-up. The workgroup last call of this document started in November. Was discussed at the in a December interim meeting, and the results of this discussion were published pushed to the mailing list on December 6th. The version 05 went through ISG evaluation, and you can see here the outcome of the evaluation we had. After this evaluation, we published a version 06, which took into account the different inputs. So the changes between the 05 and 06 are basically the changes that were the comments that were made by the different reviewers of the ISG or otherwise. We addressed a number of points raised by Ronnie Even about editorial changes. Adrian Farrell and Deborah Brungar, Richard Barnes and Stephen Farrell did a very, very thorough review, so I thank you very much for this review. We addressed the comments after that, even from that you see here, cleaned up the references, and we thank very much all the reviewers for taking the time to read this draft. The status now is in RFC editor queue, so this is our first draft to reach this status, so it's exciting. Any questions about this draft? I mean, we've been discussing this for a number of meetings. Anything we're missing? Any last comments? All right.
Thanks, Thomas. And it will be Nicolas for the next presentation about 6TISCH minimal draft. Nicolas, if you can please stand inside the pink box, because you're on TV.
Hi all. I'm presenting on behalf of Xavi and Chris the draft on minimal.
Yes, it's wireless. It's, those things work.
Okay. So the status of the draft is pretty stable. It has been adopted in IETF in the IETF 88 in Vancouver. The latest version has been published on the 8th March of 2015. The changes with respect to the IETF 91 are the clarification about the op-by-op options, the specification about the minimal security requirements for this configuration. It has been specified the time slot template, i.e. To address also non-default ones, and other several menu changes. So I will go through them in the next slides. So for the RPI and RH3 headers, the problem is that they consume a lot of the bandwidth, a lot of the packet space. So there have been studied many solutions, including the flow label, the next header compression, or in case leave it as is. It has one other possibility is to use the Zigbee IP approach. So for casting the ETSI plug test, the strict stability requirement, it has been chosen to leave it as is. So with the IP and IP plus RH3 or RPI. Then the Zigbee IP approach will be started. So about the change on the headers of RPI and RH3, the main things changed into the draft is the specification that they should be compliant. The op-by-op extension should be compliant with the RFC 6553 and with RFC 6554, and so they be encapsulated according to the standard RFC 6282. About security, there's the introduction of two keys. One used for authenticating enhanced beacons, so all the frame of the enhanced beacons. This is done because we want that when there are many networks that can interfere, this is to allow that non-enabled nodes to join a particular network. So as a second key is used to authenticate all the other packets like data acknowledgements and MAC command frames. Then the time slot IE has been specified in all details, taking that from the standard IEEE 802.15.40. And other minor changes. It has been clarified that time synchronization should start at the first bit of the packet after the SFD leaves the transmitting in the transmitting cell, or it's received by the receiving one. It has been removed the reference to the discontinued internet draft PIN role ripple industrial applicability. It has been indicated the precedence of all of IEEE 802.15.4e, so the change that would be done in that to apply in any case to minimal, and typos and minor grammar corrections. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. Questions? And do we have Chavi and Chin maybe hearing? Are they on Jabber? Okay, so maybe
yes,
also.
Pascal, I'm here.
Okay, great. So probably questions for you, Chavi.
René Struik. I have a question on one of the previous slides, the slide on security. Could you go to that? Yeah, this one. I was wondering about this second paragraph. So it talks about two keys, one of the keys being used for announced beacons and the other key to be used for, I guess, all other frame types. How are those keys, how do these keys get into the device?
I'm sorry?
How do these keys get into the device?
Do you want to answer?
They can be, the key distribution is out of scope. So there can be also many ways of including the keys into the mode. So also a pressure key.
Because I'm concerned that you hard code a security policy in this draft, and I would really recommend to remove the entire second paragraph from this draft. I noticed that it was not in the previous draft, and it has been put in, I think, without really too much discussion.
Yeah, so to clarify, we discussed this at the.
I know the particular conference call where I thought we were discussing another topic, but there were no slides available online. But so I think this is inappropriate to put this in this minimal draft.
Okay, so the context of this draft is just to provide the minimal, the absolute minimal set of mechanisms to use 15.4e. So if we don't put anything security related, it means that people implementing it will not have any security. It will be just
the key distribution scheme. All the details are out of scope. It was said, right?
Yeah.
So.
So the idea. So let me maybe go to that microphone. It will be easier.
I think this is imprudent and it should be removed in my.
So Thomas Watena, the idea here is that this is the minimal configuration. There is no entity that does key distribution. And so if we, in the absence of such an entity, there's also no entity that does the scheduling. That's why it's called minimal, right? The schedule is hard-coded and is the absolute minimal configuration to use these networks. So we don't have any entity that does scheduling. We don't have any entity that is responsible for key distribution, because this is what we want to implement at the very first plug test, the easiest thing you can ever do. And the easiest in terms of security, in my personal opinion, is just a pre-shared key that's pre-configured in the modes.
So I think what could be useful is to remove this key K1, and if people for a plug fest want to install by some kind, let's say by a USB plug, a second key, that's fine. But there's many options to do things, and I think there have been months of discussions at 6TISCH security group, and I was kind of surprised to see this suddenly popping up in the minimal draft.
Ted Lemon. So do you think that this actually prevents what a future security solution from being deployed, or is your concern just that you think it's inadequate?
I think it will turn out to be a very unfortunate technical step. Why? I presented the draft on Monday of 18 pages, which included lots of MAC considerations, and one of the MAC considerations had exactly to do with the enhanced beacon key. So we can go over the draft, but I think we discussed in completely other documents. Right? It has been discussed in 5 microseconds on the conference call.
We have a few minutes, so I don't think it's inappropriate to explain to the group now that the problem is open, to explain what the story is. Go ahead.
Excuse me?
We have some minutes there. We are ahead of the agenda, and then there is a problem here. So if you could please explain in like 3 minutes what hurts if this key is present.
Well, I can first describe another mechanism that I think in a group of people who worry about security issues has been considered as an alternative, and has also been described in this consideration draft, where the enhanced beacon, the security of enhanced beacon is irrelevant for a joining device, because the joining device doesn't have keying material yet, right? So I just want to make sure, because this is basically, I read this as, oh, we have to put by default wireless HART into the 6TISCH.
No.
And I'm fine with having a discussion, but I'm not fine that this is being put in like this without any necessity. There is no need to have 2 keys here for the minimal draft. It could be just simply 1 key. Because now we have hardcore policies.
Nothing says that K1 is different from K2.
So, Thomas Watene, no workgroup share hat on. The idea here is really to have the minimal, the simplest, agreeable, absolutely not most efficient solution. And as we are for the schedule saying it's hard coded, how it's the simplest you can get.
The simplest you can get, but by using a key here, it means that if it is possible that you mess up MAC pip tables that includes non-related attributes, in this case the ASN-related attributes.
But Thomas, again, I don't see the alternative. I mean, this does not prevent at all any join process and everything that you've described and that we're working on and advancing on the security design team. This is simply the alternative for me is just to leave everything in the clear, which I'm not happy with.
So the alternative is to use the non-specified key by non-specified key distribution mechanism also for the enhanced beacon.
So.
There's a message from Tom Finney which says, I agree with René that the inclusion of this current paragraph is premature, in that it forever enables the relatively insecure keying mechanism. While I do not agree completely with René's approach, many of these arguments are relevant here. And then Xavi says that what should be done then? And then Xavi says, without requiring a complete key distribution architecture. Tom Finney answers that he says, distinguish between minimal and that necessary for a plug-fest demonstration.
Yeah. Thank you, Diego. So I have a clarifying question for you, René, then. Are you concerned with the fact that we use a pre-shared key or that we write the key in the draft? Because if it's the second thing, it's easy enough to say, you shall put a key in that you choose. Would that satisfy your concerns? Saying, look, we have nodes, that there's no security establishment protocol or anything there. Is it okay with you to just say, and you'll put a 16-byte key, pre-configured?
I think for plug-fest purposes, you don't need the second paragraph. And that would address my concern.
So basically, you want the EBs in the clear, and then there can be a key, whatever it is. That's what you're saying.
So,
yes, the room, there's a problem with the room. I'm trying to paraphrase, just to make sure I understand what you're saying. I understand that you're saying that you want the beacons in the clear, and then people can install a key whichever way they want for the traffic?
That's not at all what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we should not have a distinguished key for enhanced beacon and have in the same section basically it could be well-known key and so on. Because, well, I don't want to get into more discussion about it. I already.
Yeah, but I'd like to.
Yeah.
I'd like us to answer because this is.
Okay. So it's entirely feasible to have enhanced beacons properly authenticated and encrypted using a real secret key, right?
Yes.
It doesn't have any impact for receipts by a joining node, for example, right? Because the joining node doesn't have any keying material; it will only see the visible part of the.
Yeah, but the node is there's no joining node in the sense that it doesn't transition from joining to joined. There's no joining protocol. It's just there. It just starts talking and it uses the key that is already the final one. There's no key distribution. There's no joining. It's just you switch it on and boom, it's part of the network.
I'm just concerned that this draft will make it to RFC and then we will have a security discussion and will be, oh, in RFC we have now to stick to these things because they're there as a kind of a bootstrapping of a solution where this key K1 will be effective live. Yes.
Yes, we need to rotate.
Yoshirova. Regarding the use of well-known keys, I'm not against having it in this draft, but we should add a warning text for using the well-known key. It's basically not secure, right? It shouldn't be recommended. It can be used maybe for interoperability testing purpose, but in the actual net.
So I think the text might be not very elegant, which can be well known by the network devices. It's not well known, everybody knows them. It's pre-known by the devices.
It's hard-coded in some specification, right? Maybe.
Excuse me?
The well-known key is hard-coded.
No, it's not.
So then, can you please define what exactly well-known key is?
It's as a vendor, you go into the nodes and you type in, you hard code a key, which is your choice. You provision
the
the
same
key.
as pre-configured key.
I apologize. You're right. It's not hard coded. It's pre-provisioned by hand in the devices, and you choose whichever one you want. So it's not.
So it doesn't mean all the world.
No.
knows that key. Okay.
That's not the intent. That's not the intent.
Robert Craigie. So 2 points here. First of all, I'm trying to understand from Rene, and I haven't really had a clear answer from him, what the issue is with having key K1. And secondly, I have a question with regards to a node trying to get onto the network. Does it have to have key K1 pre-installed, or can it just use the beacon? You know, even though it's protected, can it just use the beacon and take its contents without, obviously it won't be able to authenticate it, but could it take that content and just use it anyway for steering purposes? Because if the latter is true, then I don't see any issue with that statement there.
So, should I answer? Yeah. You receive a beacon and you authenticate it using it's just authenticated, and then.
Yeah. So the beacon will, whoever emits the beacon will, apply the CBC MAC.
Correct.
On it.
And have a.
And whoever hears the beacon, they may or may not have the key. If they don't have the key, it'll fail the authentication process, but there's still valid content it could use there for steering purposes. Is that the case? I mean, it's it has to take it with a pinch of salt, obviously, because it could be anything, but nevertheless, it may be enough to direct it in the right direction.
Yeah. One subtlety is that if I really want to pre-provision a key which is a secret, then a node that doesn't know the key would join the network according to you.
Exactly. Anyway. And if you have the ability to pre-provision it, then obviously it's going to be much better in verify the beacon.
So do I conclude that you don't have an issue with this text, Robert?
Okay, Subir, I think that's if we say that key distribution is out of scope, right, and then we describe the key, how the key behavior, I think, and not completely defined, I think that's what I would think it's inadequate. Because if we are saying the key out of scope, right, and then we are trying to describe that and not fully describing the, I think that little bit, no, it contradicts. And then, correct me if I understood, I think that's, even if this well-known key, Thomas, with your example, it is a pre-configured key, correct? So if we just say that it includes pre-configured keys at the node, will not that be sufficient? Why we bring more confusion with the term, and then because it's you mentioned that it's a pre-provision and pre-configured, right? So and it's not known by anyone, only the devices which are pre-configured. So that language should be sufficient. That's okay. If you want to include pre-configured keys, that's fine. And then I think that to Robert's point, I really don't know if a new node coming to the network, it does not have that pre-configured key, what that node will do, right? That could be a valid node. That could be want to join to the network, and we are not describing that part, right? That means that we do not allow that in the minimal draft. I think that seems to be inadequate. I think to answer, I think that what Eddie asked, that is inadequate. My response to yes, it is inadequate. Okay. One side we are saying key distribution out of scope, and then we are describing partial things, not fully, and then we are not describing that scenario that if the node does not have the key, what that behavior would be.
So,
excuse me, Thomas. So we'll conclude this with those three people because now we are getting out of time. And I understand that we'll have to work that text on the mailing list, in particular to address your and Robert's comments. It's very clear that we have not the full story here. We need a more complete and consistent story. So that needs to be revised. Susan.
Okay. Chair Hosanna from Java says, I think an action item is to clarify the work well known and more preferably remove it and use it only pre-configured.
Which was Subir's point. Yes.
I'm okay if we remove any notion like well-known and add the word cryptographic to cryptographic keys, because they have a well-defined meaning in the security literature.
Good.
So I think I fully agree what you are suggesting, right? But one point I would like to mention that I need to go through the draft again. We mentioned the first sentence, 2 security mechanisms are considered, right? If we keep that sentence, right, we have to say something what those security mechanisms are, right? Because we start with the 2 security mechanisms are considered.
That's true. We have a draft, actually, we have René's draft, but we cannot point on it because it's too early stage.
Otherwise, I think that we may not use that particular language that I think that for security properties in the first sentence, I think this is good that we are supporting all the security properties, right? And maybe it's maybe a language issue, but I think that's another important aspect that needs to be addressed.
Okay, so let's take that to the list, and please make proposals. I want to change this particular word for that particular reason. People must understand why we want to change a term exactly, and that will be it for. Next one is. So the next discussion is on the 6TISCH architecture. So the 6TISCH architecture has now gone through last call, and the shepherd was Shweta Bandari. So we really deeply thank Shweta for the hard work. We are now in the process of solving all the problems that were raised during the last call. So I wanted to just, because we are completing this first volume of the architecture, give a sense of history of why we did all this. So the story all started with this idea of time-slotted channel hopping, which transformed a CA MAC into a deterministic MAC. And that makes all the difference, not only to improve dramatically the delivery ratio, but also to improve the consumption and extend the life of batteries. So that's where we started, and we thought, okay, because this MAC has those properties and those results, at the end of the day, it's important for us to place IPv6 on it. And this MAC has been proven over the recent years in a number of industrial standards. Doesn't mean that it's only applicable to industrial standards. So we figured that, if it's good enough for industrial, probably it's good enough for a number of other activities. And that's a good reason to bring it to the IETF. Now, we often get the question, hey, you have to synchronize all those devices, build this network, it's kind of a complex operation. Isn't it too difficult, too hard for my use case? I mean, do I need all these things? And what I answer usually when I get that question is that yesterday's magic is today's technology, or the other way around. Today's technology is yesterday's magic. At the end of the day, once the complexity is burnt into the software, into the silicon, we forget about this complexity. We don't realize how complex an iPhone can be. We just use it. And in the same fashion, once we have open source implementation, silicon, and everything that does 6TISCH, we will forget that it was so complex to design and synchronize and all. It will just work much better than something else, and we'll be happy with it. So we actually find now deployments of TSCH even for streetlights. So it's not something which is contained in industrial. There are already applications in smart metering, in lighting, all sorts of application, trains. You find it everywhere already. So it's a trend that's just growing. And on the side, the complexity that we pay for with this synchronization mechanism gives us a very useful property, which is that we have a sense of time and sense of time since time equals 0 with the absolute slot number, the ASL, which is now a number that we can use for security. So that's an additional property that can be very useful. So why now did we start this kind of huge work that's the architecture? One of the problems we faced trying to bring IPv6 in other venues was that the IETF has kind of slotted the work into working group areas, and the result is a divided picture with overlaps and gaps. And when people outside the IETF try to put things together, they realize that, well, the story is not complete. Please, Mr. IETF, I can't read 7,000 RFCs. Please give me the RFCs I need, and please show me how they work together. So that's really the core of what we wanted to do at 6TISCH. We didn't want to reinvent 6LoW or RAW, right? We were there to find out how those things work together. And if there is a discrepancy, if there is a missing piece somewhere, then go and talk to 6LoW, go and talk to RAW, and try to figure out how we can make the whole story complete. And now we would describe that whole story in the 6TISCH architecture. That's really what we wanted to do. And as we move forward, there are a number of new questions that we find. Like Monday, we had the rechartering discussions, and we found that there's a lot of work that can be pushed as well to groups which are doing traffic engineering, like TEAS, CCamp, PCE, for the deterministic part of the programmation of what we call the tracks in 6TISCH, which is this multi-hop path that we carve into the schedule. So a big chunk of the 6TISCH work is present the big picture, a big picture that works together, that's consistent, and then go and see the working group where the individual elements are being designed, and try to work with those groups, even proposing drafts, which from people from this team actually, into those groups, and see how we can proceed with that. We did not only push work outside, we actually found that some of those elements did not belong necessarily any place. For instance, because we are working on this particular TSCH MAC, we found that there is a missing layer, and we'll talk a lot about this missing layer today, between what the IEEE provides, which is, hey, here are time slots, and what the IETF needs. I need an IP link, right? So a bunch of time slots is not an IP link. So how do I map a packet going down the stack into a particular time slot on my schedule? So this sort of question, there was no answer for them. And there was no group at the IETF in charge of doing this, so it looked like obvious that we would be doing it. We have work which will be presented by Diego later about dynamic scheduling. That's also an important thing that needs to be thought of, and that belongs to an architecture. Because if you look at the way things work usually in the IP world, you have a stochastic radio like Wi-Fi. So CSMA/CA gives you a chance that things will be sent at some point of time. And we place stochastic traffic over it, which is like IP, right? The IP packets are statistically multiplexed, so they can come at any point of time. There is actually a good match between the CSMA stochastic operation and the IP packet multiplex. But if you look at the way industrial flows work, the MAC is deterministic and the flows are deterministic. That's also a good match. You know exactly when the packets come in, and you can program your network to just accept those packets. With this, you get optimized deterministic properties. The problem is when your MAC operation does not match your flow. So if you see this matrix of deterministic, non-deterministic, stochastic flow, deterministic flow, you find that stochastic over stochastic is easy, deterministic over deterministic is easy, and then you've got a problem on the two other sections of cells of my matrix. Either you try to do deterministic over a CSMA/CA MAC, and people try that, and that's not really workable unless you use your MAC down to 1,000th of its capacity. Or you say, oh, could I be doing stochastic traffic over my deterministic MAC, which means really that now I've got to manage my schedule so as to add and remove time slots in the schedule to adapt to the variations of the IP traffic. And that's really the challenge that 6TISCH has taken upon already, not yet chartered, and that will be a lot of the chartering discussion today, but the work on the fly and all those things are really about this section where the MAC is deterministic, that's 6TISCH, but the traffic is stochastic. Okay. As we put together all this work, we have a number of examples where the design of the architecture ends up finding that there are missing pieces. A number of the missing pieces are actually transformed into requirement drafts or solution drafts in a number of working groups. Example of that is COMI. COMI is the way we actually program our network, and the work is being done at core. So it's very important for us that the COMI work progresses. The 6775, the 6-LOP IND requirement draft, there are a bunch of requirements. A lot of those requirements actually come from the design of the 6TISCH architecture. How do I make RIPL work with 6LoWPAN? That's a big part of that. How do I build my multi-link subnet with a backbone, which is critical for things like ISA 100.11a? So how do I build that with IPv6? Well, that's all in the 6TISCH architecture, and that's all turned into requirements to 6LoW. Right? That's how we work. And then the 6LoW routing dispatch, which is right now a proposal to compress the RIPL artifacts in the packet. This document is at 6LoW. It may, once 6LoW accepts the way we do things, it may move to roles. So Michael and Samit are in the room, so I may show this. So basically, the goal of Archie: present the full picture to the people who are not from the IETF, make sure that the IETF is consistent as all the pieces, and when it's not there, push some work in the relevant working groups at the IETF. So where are we with the architecture? So we like I said, we passed last call with the first volume. Our idea is it's not a full story that may be updated. It's just the first volume of a sequence of volumes. As we get more items recharted, we'll add volumes. Doesn't mean we'll deprecate the previous one. We'll just add stuff. So we've been having all those weeklies and bi-weekly interim calls at 6TISCH for almost 2 years. We've had, for the next 6 months, there was the design security design team which met and also worked. So what we are doing with the 6TISCH architecture here is aggregate all the decisions, all the progress that was made, and present it to the rest of the world. And last but not least, since it's the aggregation of a lot of work by a lot of people, there are actually 6 or 7, including me, authors for this document. So we talked with the ADs on Monday and on Tuesday, and figured that the proper way to actually represent that was to have a consistent contributor section with all the contributors. So then when we publish this document, you'll find that there will be only the editor on the main page, and then all the contributors who actually wrote text into this document will be in the contributor section. That will be the 6 people that I really thank for the hard work. And I also thank deeply, I mean, the huge list of people who are acknowledged, because that was 2 years work for the whole group, and many people joining the calls every week or bi-weekly. So thank you all so much. Status is that we published 06, which answers most of the questions that we got during the last call. There are 2 pending questions. The first one is about security. I think it's mostly resolved with 06. There was a sentence that René suggested we remove that was removed. And I was not clear personally if there was a consensus on some particular text, because I saw some mail on the mailing list which seemed to indicate to me that there was no consensus on those particular sentences. But after talking to the people, it appears that it's okay. So I still want this written on the mailing list, but for me, the security problem is solved. And we didn't have time to go through, before the cutoff, through all the comments, because Michael made a really thorough, and thank you, Michael, for your review. But we didn't have time to solve all the issues that Michael raised. So past that, I think we'll be ready to push to the IASG. Michael, do you agree? Do you see?
I'm on. Some of my comments were not necessarily actionable. So Michael says that some of the comments were not actionable. Michael, next time maybe.
So we're pretty much there. Just, you know, time to wake up from the IETF, and we'll publish a 7 and try to push it to ISG.
Any questions about this draft to Pascal? Anything from Jabber, Diego? No? Okay, so I propose that we move on to the next presentation about the terminology draft, and we have a remote presenter, Mariarita Paratela, who is calling in from Luxembourg. Mariarita, are you there?
Yes, hi, Thomas.
Wonderful.
So I will present the terminology draft, and the last, you can move to the next slide. So this is a working group document that was adopted at the IETF 88 in Vancouver. A last version of the draft has been published on Monday, even though it was already ready since some time ago. And there have been some change compared to the last IETF meeting. Mainly, we have added some new terms. We have improved the definition of other terms that were already in the draft. And we deleted some that we thought for the time being were not relevant, and because they are not really used. And I mainly incorporated the comment and feedback that I received from René and Chonggang. I thank them a lot for the review. Next slide, please. So let's give a quick look to the main change. So in terms of definition that we have improved, we improved some of the terms that are the basic concept of TSCH, like the enhanced beacon frame and ASCN. The blacklist, we thought it is better to specify blacklist of frequency for making clear we are referring to channel we are not using. And then we have also improved the definition of new term that 6TISCH defined, like the channel distribution usage matrix and the chunk, that refer to a different matrix from the TSCH schedule. And we have also defined some, we have also improved some terms that are mainly related to security, like JCE and JA. And following the discussion that we are having about the deterministic network, we felt the need of adding a definition of deterministic network, and also in line with the concept of CDU matrix and chunk, we have defined what we mean for interference domain. And another slide, little different, the change was about talking about PCE cell track reservation. It was in this way in the previous draft, but now we talk about a centralized cell track reservation for having a symmetry with the decentralized one. Next slide, please. And then we have deleted, as I said, some definition like co-op because we don't really need it, and other concepts still related to the chunk. And there was a lot of discussion between René and Michael related to some terms that were mainly used for security, and in the end we agreed to not include them. And finally there are some little change in terms of format and style. We spell out some of the acronym that were included in the definition, and also we fixed the uppercase for the first letter of each term. And that's it. So the draft is in a stable state, and so far we didn't receive other comment. There wasn't much discussion, so we can consider it ready.
Okay, so is there any question before I start? No question on terminology? So there's a procedural question. We think we have the answer, but since Ted is in the room, we have a normative reference in the architecture and in minimal towards the terminology because we use it. And so we understand that means that we need to push the terminology together with the other drafts so that they can get their RFCs together. We also understand since we remove the security terms just because we're not ready, but we will need them. That also means that if we push this terminology document, we'll have to have an update of it. Is it a problem?
So I'm just telling you, this is an individual contributor. He used to be an AD.
Yes, I should have asked Brian, yeah.
But the answer to that is probably what's going to refer to the terminology draft. So you're going to be adding new information. Presumably, some new draft is going to need that information.
Yeah, it's like security typically. Yeah.
Right. So the question is, do you need any other drafts to refer to the security definition information?
Oh, okay. Otherwise, you could have contained the security new terms into the security draft. Exactly. Okay, okay. So
I mean, either way,
we don't know. We don't know yet. I just wanted to know if it was a prime to
it is
ship this one and then make an update later.
Yeah, it's not a problem to update a document. Okay. In fact, it's kind of a slam dunk. I mean, if it's a simple update, especially for something like this.
So we'll very rapidly call for last call for this particular document as well, so we can push all the work now. Thanks, Ted. Thanks a lot. And by the way, now we are at it. I think Brian, at some point, do you want to because I called for Ted, and Brian is our new area director now. I understand. So at some point, will you come to the mic and make this announcement? So we. Yes.
So Brian Haberman, you're newly ordained shepherding AD. What Ted said.
No, just saying, well, to the group, okay, now we are, transitioning, and we thank Ted so much for all you did for us. I mean, that was fantastic.
Right.
And now.
Yes. I think most of you know me from other working groups in the INT area. So if you have questions about what's going on here or a concern, feel free to find me. I'm usually pretty easy to talk to.
Thanks, friend. And with this, we'll move to the next, which should be 6-stop interface, and Xavi should be on Mitico. Xavi, can you hear us?
Hello, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm going to present the 6-stop interface draft and lately the 6-stop sublayer draft. And this second draft is not still adopted by the group, and I think it's not, and I think that what we do there is not part of the charter. So I will go just slightly through it. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the interface draft was adopted in the IETF 89, and the latest version was published the 9th of March. And we did several changes since the last IETF. Can you go please to the next slide? So the first thing we did is to address all the security aspect comments or attributes identified by Michael Richardson in the mailing list. So we took his comments from the list and we tried to extract the information that should be exposed by the Young model, should be able to be configured by remote nodes. And we end up with this set of attributes, and I will go through them. Can you go to the next slide, please? Okay, so the first thing is the security mode, and we extract from the mailing list comments the different types or the different possibilities. For sure, there might be others, so we are still open for that, and we need input from the security group. Then we have space for a certificate, and this is at the end is an array of bytes. So we keep in the 6-stop interface the possibility to configure an array of bytes. Next slide, please. Okay, so then we have the dep ID, the PSK, which is another array of bytes for the PSK, the PAN ID. Next slide. Yeah, so then a flag to enable this node to be as a joint assistant. Then the ULA to be used in the router advertisements. Next slide, please. The default well-known key for the beacon and the GCA address. So these are the attributes that we extract. Next slide, please. So, and from that attributes, we need to know if the architecture is going on that direction and if there are other items to be added. So that's the question to the security group. And then another thing we did was to address a mail from Jonathan Simon from DAS Networks, Linear Technology, who show us that there were some little typos and some corrections about wording and little corrections about some attributes. So we address all of them. As there are quite a lot, I haven't put them here, but if you follow this link, you will find all what we addressed. Next slide. So the discussion within this draft, and I think this is one of the most important things we still need to figure out how to do, is that for us the interface exposes the information that external entities want to access or configure on a 6TISCH node. So, And as we are interfacing the MAC layer, we need to expose, in some sense, some of the attributes, for example, the PAN ID of the network, because we want that external devices like a PC can configure the nodes. So the question is where we cut, because the PIB of 15.4 is pretty extensive, and we need to identify what attributes should be configured and what others are not so important and maybe can be configured in another way. So there's a kind of boundary that is not clear. And we don't want also to have this young model interface too wide or too big and very focused on only 15.4e attributes. So that's an open question too. Next slide, please.
So, Charlie, this is Thomas. So I'm going back to the previous slide. So that's an open question. Is it simply that we need to do the work, or are you asking for some input, for some reviews, or what needs to happen to have this move forward?
Well, so I think that we can decide, but there's lots of vendors and companies that are using that technology. So at least we need some advice, because we don't want to break or constrain what they are doing now.
Hi, Pat Kinney. Chavi, you bring up an excellent point on that first bullet. There's a lot of interfaces that need to be addressed. I'm going to bring up another one, the priority control mechanism. I know that 6TOP does have priority a queuing mechanism. However, there's also a priority mechanism within 15.4 that would be very helpful on shared slots. So who gets first access to a shared slot? So all of these things, I think we need to make sure that they've been addressed, and then as far as which ones are mandatory, which ones are optional, that's something that I can participate in, and I'm pretty sure we can come to a quick conclusion on that.
Okay,
thank you.
That would be great. Thank you.
Pat, while you're there, is there a way to match what we have here to existing standards like ISA and figure out if we are missing stuff? For instance, could there be help coming from the ISA side, say you should be programming this particular?
Yes, and that's an excellent point. I'm a part of, I'm the chair actually of 15.4 revision, but I'm also a co-chair of ISA 100, which is the wireless networking standard group. So yes, you're right. I need to keep both of my hats within reach on this one to make sure that we are consistent.
That's superb. There's one positioning that we didn't make here, but you know, there is all this story, this work about deterministic networking and how we could interface with the PC and the Ts and all those things. This is a prime which occurs far from the device. The only thing that the device is going to see is this co-op interface, which will be used to program the device with an implementation of our co-op of this data model. So the data model is critical, because once we have locked it, that's what we're going to use to talk to Ts, to talk to PC, to talk to whoever, and say, here is our data, here is what we manipulate, here is what we need to carry with your protocols if we want to use your SDN tools, your whatever, to program our devices. So this work is completely critical. And the other side of that coin is it's not something that we revise every day. It's actually very difficult to change a data model when it's been published. So we really need to be very good day one. Shelley.
Okay, yes, absolutely. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the next step is to complete section 4.3 along with the progress in 6-stop security. So if the security group inputs us with new data types or information that needs to be exposed, we will include it into the Young model. As we say, this maybe define a more generic method to expose 15.4 PIV, so we don't need to go through all the attributes. And then coordinate the effort we are doing in the interface with this other draft, the co-op IE draft, where it proposed to use RPC-like mechanisms to enable node-to-node configuration and transfer of information. So next slide. Yes.
About the point you're making, clarifying question here. There's a number of enumerations that you get in this model. We talked about the security one that you showed. And like I said, it's very hard to extend the model later. And we know that there may be multiple security models in Decennium coming up. So is there a strategy for reserving things like, let's say, reserve 1, reserve 2, reserve 3, reserve 4, so that later we can map that reserve 4 is actually this new security technique that we didn't have at some point, as opposed to just have a list which is finite and then we cannot add anything on it. Is there like a strategy that we could use for that?
I don't think there's a strategy such that, but the good thing of the Young model is that you can specify all what you want with it. So you can always add more attributes, and devices not implementing that attributes would not understand that, but would not break because the rest of things will be understood. So the only thing and the only way I see is by enabling extensions of it. But I don't know so well all the tricks of the Young model that maybe support what you're saying.
Next.
Okay, so can you go one back, please?
Slide 36 status currently.
Yes, thank you. So this is about the sub-layer draft. Okay, this draft is it explains what are the interactions between 6-stop nodes in order to agree, for example, on the schedule to use and the information and use or are behind the interface and execute that negotiation between devices in the network. This is not yet part of the charter, so we are not working a lot on it. So we haven't done changes since IETF 91. But if you go to the next slide. Here, what we propose is to use what the co-op IE draft says, which is to encapsulate what the 6-stop communication protocol, so the 6-stop to 6-stop communication protocol, the information encapsulated into co-op messages that are transported in a co-op in a 6-stop message. And then in that way, we enable the same semantics for communication between two 6-stop nodes or from a remote node like a PC. So the representation of the information is the same, despite of we are doing one hop communication or we are crossing all the network to communicate to nodes. And I think that's it. Next slide.
So
okay,
Charlie
so,
will also be presenting this draft, though he's not one of the authors, so he's presenting the co-op draft on behalf of Raghu and Poria.
okay, so yeah. So this draft is also related to the 6TOP interface, and so I volunteered to present it on behalf of Raghuram and Purya. Can you go to the next slide, please? So the status of this draft is that is an adopted draft, and it's in version 0.3. And in that version, with respect to version 2, we add a reference to COMI at core. We fix bibliography references, and we add some minor changes on typos and language compared to version 2. So this draft is pretty stable. Next slide, please. So this is the positioning of the co-op resource management and approach. So co-op is used to interact with 6TOP from a remote node, for example, a PCE, and is used to execute or get information from a node which is remote. So next slide. So the draft defines how to interact with 6TOP and control and modify schedules, monitor parameters, etc., etc. It also explains how message exchange and formats of the messages in the network using and how it interacts with the 6TOP sublayer, and also presents a particular implementation of this by using co-op and encoding the information in the payload with CBOR. Next slide, please. So the draft proposes several naming conventions. The URIs must start with co-op scheme, so they are co-op URIs. The authority must have the 6TOP username and followed by the IP address of the 6TOP node. The root path of each of the resources that are accessed is 6TOP, and then for each of the functionalities that we access through co-op in a particular node and which are mapped to the 6TOP interface, we keep a very short descriptive name. We will see that. Next slide, please. So the mapping between the 6TOP commands that are defined in the 6TOP interface and the COP methods is that when we issue a GET, we apply a read command in 6TOP, which this is used to obtain information from a configuration or from a resource in 6TOP. Post to create, update, delete to delete, and post to configure. And I think this is a typo and should say put instead of post. Yeah, so next slide, please. Okay, so here are several examples. Imagine that we want to get information from the neighbor list of a node. So the URI path will be co-op, 2 semicolons, then the IP of the node, then /6TOP/ neighbor list. And there in that resource, we can access, we can do a put, a get, a read, and we will access to that information. Next slide, please. So we say that there are informational resources, those that can be read, and we access them through a GET. So here you have some examples. Next slide. And here we have more information about how a GET will work, and the options that can be sent, for example, the target node address, and this will get information about that neighbor, and the same for post or delete, and the information is encoded with CBOR. Next slide, please. Here we have more examples and then the respective co-op responses. And next slide. Okay, so here we have an example of the interaction. The co-op client, for example, sends a request, a post to the 6TOP neighbor list. Then this gets to the node at the co-op layer, at the co-op implementation at layer 4. Then this goes down the stack and calls the 6TOP layer, who adds the neighbor in the list, and eventually, if the command requires communication with another node, it executes this 6TOP to 6TOP communication. Once the action is done, then there's a 6TOP confirm that it then triggers the co-op response. Next slide, please.
This is very similar.
Yeah, this is very similar. Next one. Yeah, and this is the observe the observe functionality of co-op, where a client can request for a resource and get subscribed to it, so it doesn't need to request more information more times, issue the get, but it gets like pushed with the information periodically. So that are the different models that we see. And next, please. Yeah, I think that's it.
So any questions? So for Xavi, thank you, Xavi, for agreeing to present this draft, even though you're not an author.
Yeah, Samita, Xavi, I have a question for you. So I see the 6TOP request and response. So the question is, are these specific information for 6TOP only, or it could be applicable in general for other kind of devices? What I'm trying to get at, whether this is this could be applied to 6-low devices as well.
Well, so this draft addresses the interaction between a client and a node that implements the 6TOP interface. So we are thinking on exposing through co-op the YANG model or the data model that we are building at 6TOP. However, we also support extensions. So and we thought that the resource will be /e for extension, and in there you can query other information from a node. So I'm not sure if this answers your question, but this is the way we think that we can extend. We can extend the functionality.
So Thomas, another thought. I mean, this is just using COMI, right? The constraint management interface. So it's just COMI addressing the 6TOP sublayer. So there's no reason why COMI couldn't address 6LoWPAN or any other thing that needs monitoring and management. So I don't, to address other sublayers or entities or whatever we want to call it within a 6Low node, I don't think we would extend this. I would think we would just use the same mechanisms so that we don't have to re-implement everything.
So I think then maybe we could think about renaming 6TOP request, 6TOP response to a generic name. So that way we could apply it to other devices with extension. Does that make sense?
Thomas again, yes, I fully agree.
Yes, I agree.
I'd like to point out that this document is an interesting situation because it is it is stable. It is mostly a reference to other documents, but the other documents are not complete yet. I mean, they are still work in progress, like COMI and the 6TOP interface. So we can't really progress that. We want to progress this document. I mean, it's done, right? But because it references documents which are still work in progress, we think it's just better to hold it a little bit. For instance, if there is a change for some reason, we can't fathom that COMI would change dramatically to the point that what we say here is actually obsolete. And why push it to RFC too early? So we are in this situation where we are holding this document.
I have kind of an administrative question for Peter about COMI. Can you give us? I mean, we're very happily using it and support it fully. Can you give us an update on the status and what you think?
Peter van der Stok?
Peter van der Stok, yeah.
The status is that we hope that it becomes a working group document today. Other hand, I haven't heard too many comments that the contents will change a lot. There have been some comments about that there are some specific seats which are in RESTconf, which we have suppressed in COMI because it takes a lot of coding space. I don't know how the working group will react to that. Okay.
And I've been contacted by the NetConf chair yesterday about the fact that RESTconf is going into is close to being finished, and so they're asking for reviews. So I think we'll have a cascade of reviews, if I understand correctly, of first RESTconf and then COMI.
That looks the correct order at this moment. Yeah.
I'm sorry?
That looks like the correct order at this moment.
Okay, so no, you're not blocking anything. It's going its route and all is good. Perfect.
I hope it will become a working group document, and after that there are less blockage.
Thank you.
Just two comments. The first one is a little bit editorial. I saw you use the term the publish and the subscribe, but basically the co-op is observe. I was wondering if you want to use the observe to be consistent with the co-op spec. The second comment is here you basically between the co-op layer and the 6TOP layer kind of cross-layer design. Will you consider some overhead? Because I didn't see the slides and the draft. You mentioned any overhead by doing this cross-layer design between the 6TOP and the co-op layer.
Well, this is an architecture, right? If you talk about implementation, it's sometimes different, right? The implementation might be a lot more tie-in, but the architecture delineates the co-op and the 6TOP because there are two different entities, right? Is it?
So I get your first point. I don't fully get your second point. You say it's.
My second comment is because right now you are doing something a little bit different from the regular co-op behavior. Let's talk about the, if you look at the regular co-op behavior, right? You get a packet from IP layer, and then through the UDP layer, you pass to the co-op layer. And this regular co-op message will be processed according to the current co-op spec. For example, I'm going to send the ACK back, or I'm going to send the response back. But here, I think the usage of the co-op here is a little bit different from the regular co-op. And that part, I think two aspects. One, first aspect is that difference is not described in my view in the slide draft. The second aspect is that action could cause extra overhead. Yeah, that's my second comment.
So this is Thomas. It's my understanding that we really don't want to change anything to. I mean, if it appears like this, I don't think it's intentional. I don't think we're trying to change anything to co-op or anything to COMI or change any of the idea is that you have a co-op endpoint at the application layer. That co-op endpoint terminates some resources which are representative of the sublayer's resources. And when you hit those resources, get put push delete, there's an internal call from the application layer down into the sublayer at layer 2.5 if you want, internal to the node, but everything that goes over the air is just pure co-op.
Yes, it would be good that you have this representation, but imagine all the layers, and then in the vertical network management entity, which has basically capabilities to configure every layer. So the co-app would basically talk to this network management entity vertical square, right? And from there you can manage every layer in the device. That's classical.
Yeah, I agree with what you are saying, Pascal. Because if you look at the OS side, the layer 7 layer model, so basically between two label layers, we have the service access point SAP. So you indicate to the page you confirm, but here you put the resource in maintain and the 6 top layer, and then co-app layer, when co-app layer receives this message, in order to get the value of this statistic, for example, you need to have a SAP like interface from the co-app layer to the 6 top. That's and I think we need to describe clearly, and also if you cause some overhead, we need to discuss that.
Oh. Okay. Yes. We usually so we don't go down into some standards are very deep into I have all those network management SAPs for layers between the NME, which is vertical, and the ISA 100 is really structured like that. Usually at the IETF we just expose the outside of the box, and so we say you talk co-app to the box and the box will handle it. But we could draw this picture. It could be useful.
Thank you. Any further questions about this draft? Okay, thanks again, Chavi, for presenting it. Oh, sorry.
Just quick questions. If some really
name, please.
Oh, this is Zhuo. If some device is really constrained, that may not support co-app, so it will not become the 6TISCH network. Because in IETF there has like 3 categories of device, right?
Yeah.
Class 0, class 1. For some like class 0 device, it may not support the co-app because the code size is so small. The flash memory.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you're right. I mean, you cannot use central the way it's designed now. With this, you cannot use centralized scheduling if you don't have co-app running on your node.
Okay. They kind of some condition.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know what the alternative is though. I mean, the reasoning was or is for the application for your data, you're going to have a co-app implementation on board anyways. So you might as well just reuse it for management. But if you don't have a co-app implementation at all and it doesn't fit,
minimal.
Yeah, you can run minimal, basically.
Okay, it's kind of 6TISCH node need to have the ability to have the co-app.
So for doing central scheduling, you need to have co-app implemented. If you cannot have co-app implemented, the only thing you can use in 6TISCH is the minimal draft, which is a static schedule, a non-dynamic schedule, which is suboptimal, but which runs.
Okay, but I think it's like most node is support like maybe do not have co-app, but they have IP layer. But do you think like the IP?
Well, I mean, I'm just discussing here. If we say, okay, we don't have space for co-app, then we need to implement something ourselves, and we'll end up with co-app again, right? Well, at best, or more complicated. So, yeah. So thank you for your comment.
So, do I take it that we should actually have a sentence or two in the draft say, okay, I mean that reference, the customs work on the classes, and then say it doesn't apply to class 0 or something.
I mean, if you have a class 0 and you do some wizardry in it and you fit co-app in there, then you might use it, right? So, we could do the must.
Michael Richardson, I want to point out something that became interesting in our observation in the security design team, was that if you are doing, and I'm actually a little bit unclear to a little bit, minimal has mostly a static schedule, but if you are doing something that is more than minimal but does not have a PCE managing it, and I don't know what we call that piece in between where nodes can schedule things on their friends, but they can't. But there's no central management. One of the things
scheduling.
Pardon me?
That's all the distributed scheduling.
Distributed scheduling. So that's what it's called. But it's not. It's more than minimal. If you have that situation, then your security requirements are actually higher than if you have a PCE. So you may need a lot more RAM to not have a PCE than to have a PCE. And that's actually kind of makes sense, because what you're really doing with the PCE is you're offloading a bunch of computation to a bigger device. It makes sense that there should be a good trade-off that you get to be smaller. So that's an interesting thing to observe, is that that makes all sense, that you have to do that. So just something to mention, that if you think not having a PCE is simpler, you might be wrong.
I think there's a whole industry that agrees with you.
Okay, I see no more comments, nothing on Jabber. No. So we're running a little bit late, about 10 minutes, but it's okay. I think we can catch up. So the next presentation is Miguel Ángel Reina about the 6TISCH plug test. Miguel, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Thank you.
Okay. So, hi everyone, and this is Miguel from ETSI. I will try to give you a brief presentation about the status of the next first 6TISCH plug test in the Prague meeting, IETF 93. So, next slide, please. So in the agenda we have the plug test details, very general details, then the plug test links, so for the website and for the registration, and then I would like to introduce a bit the group of experts that has been formed with their tasks, milestones, and who they are, in fact. So next slide, please. So as you may know, the plug test will be collocated to the IETF 93. It will be just the weekend right before the meeting, so from 17th to 19th July. And the scope of the plug test mainly will be the minimal 6TISCH draft, okay? Next slide, please. So here you have the two links for the website that is already prepared, but it's not available yet. We are still waiting for some confirmation about some details for the plug test, and as soon as we will get them, I will send an email to the mailing list so that you can go to the website to check all the details. You will be able also to use the registration link to register your company if you want to participate in the plug test. But please, they are not available yet. Next slide, please. So as I have said, so a group of experts has been formed. In this slide, you can see the main tasks and that this group of experts will be in charge of. So the main one will be the test specification development. For that one, we have already discussed within this group that the scope will be the minimal draft, as I said, but mainly focus on the sheets and REPL, okay? Then we will be implementing as well a golden device, but it's not clear yet whether we will have one or more golden images. So maybe we have only one image for all test sections, or we will have an image for each test section. So that will be decided later. And then there will be, out of the plug test, a technical report summarizing all the results and findings from the plug test. So next slide, please. So one thing that it is quite interesting for you all, it will be the milestones that this group of experts has. So as you can see, the first milestone, it is, let's say, mid-April, where we will be distributing the first draft of the test specs to let you know what we are doing and the direction that we are going to take. Then the milestone 2 will be beginning of June, where we will try to have a stable draft for the test specs. And again, it will be distributed to the 6TISCH community for getting early feedback in order to improve the test specs before the plug test. Also, the golden device will be implemented at that time, and it will send to each participant for preparing themselves for the plug test. Then the milestone 3 will be the final draft of the test specifications, including all the feedback that we may get from the during this month, June. And it will be again available for the plug test before the plug test starts. The next milestone, milestone 4, is already the plug test itself. So the deadline is the 19th because it is the end date for the plug test. And then the final milestone will be end of August, where we will try to finalize the technical report for 6TISCH, and it will be again distributed to the 6TISCH working group. Okay, so next slide. Now I would like to present the group of experts. First of all, I would like to thank everyone who applied for being part of this group. We get a lot of candidates. It was very difficult to form the group, but at the end, we took these people here in the slide that you probably very well know. So Thomas and Xavier, they will be doing the technical coordination of the plug test preparation, so for test specs and for the golden image. Maria Rita Palatela, who will be leading the test specification development. Tenfei Chan, that he will be leading the golden image development, and then myself, who will be the team leader for the plug test. And then next slide, please. Just to encourage you to bring your devices, prototypes, boards to the plug test and attend the plug test to make this first 6TISCH plug test successful. So if you have now any questions or comments.
So, thank you very much, Miguel, for presenting. If you have any questions, we're here to answer also. Miguel being remote, we're very happy to answer. This is now officially announced, so we encourage companies that want to participate or research groups that want to participate to sign up before the closing of the registration. And so if you know of any companies that are interested, spread the word, and then we should have a lot of fun in July. Thank you.
Yes, maybe Thomas, just one small note.
Please.
All the information about the registration will be in the website once it is launched. Yeah.
Great. There's no questions, so thank you very much for your presentation, Miguel. And then
thank
we
you.
Move to the next. Thank you. We move back to Dallas. Who is it, Diego, for on-the-fly sketching?
Well, hi, everybody. Name is Diego Duchovne. I'm the editor of this draft. I will thank also the, sorry, here. Okay, the ping point. Okay. I also thank all the co-authors of this draft. We have worked a lot on this during the period between the last IETF and now also. Well, the status of our draft is it was in the submission. And the latest version is 05, which was published recently, about March 7th. And well, you can find it over there on the IETF site. So I would like to go through a summary of the brief evolution of what happened. First, the 00 version, okay, was on December 5 on 2013. It was after a lot of contributions from the list when we started this topic, which was generated really a lot of movement, a lot of interest in the beginning. Okay, so it took quite a long time to get this into a draft and to agree with all the ideas that were around. Then we stabilized this with further periodic discussions, okay, just to know if there were more or less consensus on every change we did. Okay, and now we are adding compatibility and with all the other drafts, all the other drafts around with this on 6TISCH. In fact, it was mostly on 6-top, which has been one of we are one of the main users of 6-top now. So with the 2 versions, okay, in January this year, okay, March this year, okay, they have done a lot of changes. Okay, in fact, I'm going to go through them in a few minutes. So to give you and provide you a little bit of background on what we are working on, there are 3 ways basically to define how this node management works. And either static centralized, which is low rate of change for requests, meaning that it's mostly static, and as you know, with the PCs, all the requests go from the whole network, okay, back to the PC just to ask for a new cell, okay, a new subcell, or just to ask to remove one subcell from the schedule. Our approach is mostly distributed or hybrid, which has no central entity, meaning that all the negotiation goes from one node to the other, okay, and then this propagates around the network. Or hybrid, meaning that we still keep a PC-enabled network, but although the small changes are added because we need urgent changes, okay, or critical data which was transferred, which appeared suddenly, okay, which is an emergency or some kind of data which is not taken into account at the beginning within the PC. So we are working on the last 2 methods here. And well, define generally the environment and the methods you are using to enable distributed resource scheduling here. We generally ask for bandwidth requests. Okay, we are going through the whole draft. We are working on units of bandwidth, which are one of the soft cells. Each of soft cells is a unit of bandwidth for us. Okay? And bandwidth allocation. There's a bandwidth allocation algorithm within OTF that starts to take information from the statistic around, okay, mainly taken from 6-top on the queues, in fact, and decides whether to ask for more cells, okay, or to remove cells from the schedule. The allocation algorithm, of course, is out of scope, but we have a default algorithm just in case, okay, there's no other alternative, okay, or you can decide to use it in fact. And OTF is a layer 3 module. Okay, we always work on layer 3, and we are operating always on the best effort track. Now, no, okay, there we go. So this is how it looks, and we get input. So we get requests to transfer some data from one node to the other, and then we have a configuration on this side. That allows us to parameterize each of the devices of the elements inside. So we have the bandwidth estimation algorithm, which is the core of this, and an allocation policy, which is to tune and change the behavior depending on which you should be looking for to stabilize the network or have a more reactive network, reactive module to the traffic requirements. Then you get the 6-stop commands, okay, which generate events to change to ask for new cells. The 6-stop, and 6-stop provides more information from the statistics taken from the network, okay, back to the bandwidth estimation algorithm. So the configuration here with using co-op, okay, not only goes to bandwidth estimation algorithm, but we think we should go also to allocation policy from outside, which would be another chance also. Okay, next please. Thank you. So we have two versions in the, as I said, the 04 and 05. For the 04, we have changed the reactive and proactive discussion. Okay, we have eliminated that because we have changed all this part, okay, to the policy allocation module, one side, and the evolution. We have specified the evolution from a proactive threshold, okay, which is one of the elements of what was remaining from the last version, to OTF threshold, which is more general. And of course, we corrected some OTF events we were generated before. Yes. So the 05 version, okay, says that we are working on the layer 3 bundles, okay, because from the previous version, this wasn't clear, okay. We had some different approaches on layer 2 or layer 3. This is for now it's completely clear that we are working on layer 3, and on bundles specifically, we are not touching it, are not deciding which cells we're going to select. Okay, we are just asking for cells and let 6-stop decide which cells are being used. And we are going to, and we are specify also that you are using always the best effort track. We have explained that to translate OTF requirements to cellular bundle allocations, meaning that we must go, okay, and ask for this kind of allocations and nothing else but that. Also, because this was one of the arrangements we did with 6-stop. In fact, that wasn't clear in 6-stop at that time. And of course, a figure to illustrate how the thresholds work. Okay, I'm going to show in the next slide. Okay. Then we have fixed the item between multiple cell deletion, okay, because there was a small difference saying that, well, what happened when we asked for 3 or more cells or 2 more cells maybe to remove if the bundle disappeared or not. Okay, then we just ask for the cells to disappear, and the bundle is not touched. The bundle is managed by the 6-stop model. We also removed the LQI as the input to on-the-fly scheduling, because LQI is just a matter of taking information on how good or bad, okay, is our link, and that belongs to 6-stop and not to us. We inverted only section 5 and 6 to arrange the text only, and the allocation policy section was improved to connect all the paragraphs, just to improve reading, okay, to read better. So I corrected some typos. Next, please. So the allocation policy, how it works. The idea of the allocation policy here is just to improve stability, meaning that even though you have an algorithm that decides when to ask for more cells, we need to make a uniform and stable behavior around the network, not only because we don't want things to start to reserve, to allocate, cells without any limit, but also because we want to limit the resource consumption. Even energy is one of those most important. It can be parameterized, so we define where these thresholds are. Okay, and this, of course, as I said, becomes an energy compromise between increasing management traffic, yes, and under and over provision. And finally, we have defined 2 thresholds instead of the one we had on 04, the low and the high threshold for under provisioning and over provisioning, just to control the limits on this. Next, please. So this is how it works. So whenever you are within the light blue section, okay, there's nothing to do. Okay, we are within the limits of the thresholds. But whenever you go outside this region, okay, on the blue side, you have to delete, okay, and wherever we are on the top of it, you have to add. That meaning that this being the red line here, the requested, the required cells by the node, okay, the node requested cells, sorry. Then you can delete, okay, you can remove all this some cells, depending if you are outside or inside these thresholds, between these thresholds. So this way we can stabilize this, meaning that if you have maybe one cell to ask, okay, ask for, and one cell to remove, okay, they are not asking all the time for one and remove it and so on. So we wait for 3 cells to ask, then we start moving and we start reserving them. Of course, okay, this may result in under provision or over provision, but this also stabilizes, meaning that you are not using a lot of management traffic because you are asking every time for 1 cell or 2 cells. And this is you can configure it. This is an example only. You can configure for 1 cell or maybe 3 cells and so on, depending on the amount of traffic you are going to transfer. Next, please. So in version 05, okay, we replace some again some other relevant elements. So there was the formal list of events. So the list of events was growing very fast and was kind of specific for some of the events. And we thought there were many other events that should be considered. So instead of listing more events, okay, we have changed this to a general, a common structure for all these kind of events. So the user can create events and put events in this way. So but we provide a structure, this structure, with some specific elements. First, the set of parameters that we can define, okay, and the triggering conditions on how to behave. Some triggering variables, okay, which can trigger the event, in fact. A number of triggering conditions to satisfy when this is going to happen, okay, and the process handlers, meaning which are the routines or the code, okay, which is going to answer to these requests. Listen next. So, for example, if you have an allocation policy, as I said before, okay, we want to reserve more traffic or less traffic, okay, we can map this to events because this generates events. So the P, okay, it consists of the parameters on the side, okay, P of E, with the parameters of the side. So we have a low and a high thresholds here with P1 and P2, map to P1 and P2. So we have B, okay, it consists of the required cells here. So, and scheduled cells, meaning that the one way we're looking for and the one way I expectively scheduled over there. And C, and become the conditions. So whenever you have B, okay, B1 here, which is the required cells, okay, it's greater than, okay, the scheduled cells plus, okay, the authorized OTF threshold high, okay, then the event C1, okay, will happen. So I have an example here, okay. Next, please. Okay. So C1 is the event handler, which is going to answer to this. So there's the H1 will add more soft cells, and H2 will delete or remove one or more soft cells. Next, please. And this is how it relates. So the highest the high threshold, okay, goes fits within the triggering element here, fits the C1 over there. So this comparison triggers, okay, the action of H1. On the other side, okay, you have C2 here, okay, which fits from B2, P1, and B1, okay, all the parameters, the two triggers and the information, and then goes to the delete, remove the each of the cells for we asked for. Next, please. So what we are looking for in the future. The first one is to include this draft in the 6TISCH working group chart. Okay, that's what I'm looking for, and I think we are mostly ready to do that. I asked the chairs for that. And then some other items we have noticed. First of all, to refer to soft cells instead of bundles, because bundles are generally managed by 6TOP, and we like to refer to only one entity, and then let the 6TOP manage the other. And link option from cells, meaning that, and this was a very interesting thing that happened. We didn't have a consensus around the group, okay, or what to do with this kind of request. So the thing is, what happens if we are using a specific idea transmission or receiving cells and no share cells because they don't want contention? Then, if the best effort track only supports share cells, or the best effort track can support transmission and reception cells. That's a question, okay? And I think we can enable this. Okay, you can use dedicated cells. Oh yeah, this is open to discussion. I would like to discuss this before generating the 06 version. And then some text redundancy and so on, and some typos and terminology compliance, and finally to add what I said in the beginning, to define parameters for the allocation policy from using co-op from an external entity. And we are open, of course, to any ideas, corrections, or new sections, of course. Next, please. I think we're done. Yes.
So let me go back to the previous slide. So yes. So about your first point, point well taken. We will discuss it right after this. In fact. Okay. So I propose that we don't talk about this quite now in a couple of minutes, but maybe there are some.
I have a question. Yes. Clarifying question about the second point: soft cells instead of bundles. Yes. Just for the group, the bundle is a collection of cells which are directional, so from me to a certain other node, or from that other node to myself. And by putting together two bundles, one input and one output bundles, we can get an IPv6 link. So by identifying a bundle, we actually identify an IPv6 link, right? And I just fail to understand how you can say, give me more cells without saying with whom.
Yes.
So I don't understand.
Yes, the thing is, we know which neighbor we are talking to.
Right.
I mean, so we must know which the bundle we are referring to. In fact,
that's the point.
But they are using the best effort track, and the thing is, we are putting dot bundles within the best effort track, and on top of it, we are putting the cells within the bundle. So the thing is, we are referring to bundles many times within the
draft.
The draft, yes.
It's correct.
Yes, but I think we are not referring it correctly. Meaning that we are asking, sometimes we ask for a bundle, for a new bundle, which shouldn't be from my point of view, it shouldn't be right. We are asking for cells, and for a specific bundle, which should be already existent, pre-existent, or generated by 6TOP, or not automatically generated by 6TOP before the.
Okay. I didn't find that there was a mistake like that in the draft. Okay. Maybe I missed it. Okay. But yes, you must. The way you should talk to 6TOP and is say, please give me more cells on this bundle, or remove cells from that bundle.
And to create a new bundle in case they didn't exist. That
should not happen, because
that's one of the things that we are trying to
because the layer 3 must exist. I mean, initially, well, you're not supposed to create the bundles. That's a peering between because if you don't exist, the bundles must exist, right? They don't come from you. Okay. You must be able to get them, to find them, which is the bundle to go to Pierre Blanc. Yeah.
So the thing is that we don't have control on if the bundles are created or not. No, so that's what I want I was looking for here. Okay. That's not to say that we have the right to create bundles. I don't have the right to remove bundles. So there's some places that there were, I remember at least, okay, that we were saying this kind of, they were pushing this kind of idea, but maybe we can check. Okay.
Thank you, Diego. Thanks so much.
Anything?
So I must insist that this is the result of almost a year of work, which was not so far chartered, and which is dealing with the point I made earlier of a dynamic schedule that goes beyond minimal, and that fits this in this matrix of stochastic deterministic flows, stochastic deterministic MAC, that fills the cell where you've got the deterministic MAC, that 6TISCH, with stochastic traffic overhead. That's really what it is about. Thank you, Diego. Thanks so much.
So a comment from Margarita on the Jabber. So she says, it was fixed in the draft. We clarified that we ask for soft cells, and when we ask for more than one cell, 6TOP translates the request in asking for a bundle. It was already clarified in OTF. So, yeah.
I didn't read anything correct.
Diego says, thank you, Margarita. Thank you.
Oh, well, I told you a few things, right? You received my mail. You have swapped delete and yeah.
And I believe, Nicola, you're already implementing this, right? You're working on implementation.
And now we will have the last alpha hour to discuss the rechartering of 6TISCH. So as you know, we have mostly completed the draft, the work that we wanted to achieve with the current charter. So for memory, there was the 6TISCH architecture. There was the interface so as to program the time slots into the devices, so, which we now do through co-op using the 6TOP interface. Sorry. And so now it's time to figure out if we want to complete this working group or take new work in. And as you know, we've got the security design team working. We've got the dynamic scheduling work in place. So we kind of figure that we should recharter this group. So I have a number of items in this list that I would like to discuss in the next half hour. The first item, we'll come back to it. It's a suggestion by Pat Kinney to actually elide the E from the current charter, so as to say that the MAC that we are operating upon is the TICH form of 822.15 as opposed to the TICH method from 822.15 for E, right? Just elide the E, and Pat will make the case at the end of this discussion about why that's a good idea. Second question, so we have like 10 minutes to discuss that piece, is what do we do about security? So there's a lot of work going on security in many places at the IETF at this moment. A number of us will be meeting tonight at 7 p.m. to actually figure out what's going on under the lead of Samita and the 6LO working group. So we'll have like a session on what's going on in security, how can we move more homogeneously, etc. So we'll feed you back with the result of that. But for this particular question is, are we capable, are we willing to take in security work on the joint process? And this trying to explain what I mean by this item here is not only try to standardize the joint process of RTSCH, but in René's draft, you see he makes a distinction between authentication, authorization, and configuration. And so how much of that should be added to the recharter? The second recharter item is about centralized scheduling. So we don't necessarily have much to change on the text in the current charter, because the text in the current charter says we work with other relevant working groups, which really means that, okay, we have to find out what the relevant working groups are. On Monday, we talked about deterministic networking, and we found that the relevant working groups would be PCE for the path computation, TIS and CCamp for expressing the requirements, the topology, and then publishing the flows into the network. And then the question we had on Monday was that should 6TISCH interface with those groups directly, one by one, or would it be a good idea if we could get a DetNet working group formed? So we would interface with DetNet and push our requirements to DetNet, and then DetNet would work for us and for other use cases as well, and with PCE, TIS, and CCamp. So there was basically kind of a discussion on that, and the result was overwhelmingly in the group that we would prefer to have an external entity front-ending PCETs, etc. for us. And then we would push requirements from 6TISCH. But even that needs a new charter item. And last but not least, that's really the core of the discussion we just had with Diego, is the only thing we were chartered with the initial charter for 6TISCH was to define, quote unquote, the API, the co-app, the data model to go and program our devices. But we were not chartered for describing the operation of the 6-stop layer. And we were not chartered for describing the stochastic dynamic adaptation of the schedule, which, for instance, can be implemented using the IETF draft. And so basically, these are the main charter items on the table. So I would like to start a discussion on security first. So do we feel that we have a quorum of people and work going on that can lead us safely and efficiently to a joint process for TSCH? Is it something that should happen that's sufficiently dependent on TSCH so it should happen in our group? Any comment? Michael? Can you please, Michael, introduce the DT and the activity that has been going on before you, just to justify why we are there today, right?
So my name is Michael Richardson. 13 or 14 months ago, a security design team was created. I thought that the let me before I say that. So what we thought we were doing, or I thought we were doing, was that we were going to basically explore the security, particularly the join process, the zero-touch join process, and look at a number of different possible mechanisms and what their various properties were and how they matched into the zero-touch space. Since the security itself was not, in fact, chartered, the critical thing was, what does the eventual security solutions and requirements have? What is the impact to the system architecture, to the architecture document? And to produce a set of architectural concepts of how the security might work from an architecture point of view without going into the details. But to do that, you have to actually go down into the details and then come back and say, you know, it looks a little bit like this, and these are some properties that we have discovered. Since that process started 13, 14 months ago, the IETF has created the ANIMA working group. And so I think that's a pretty important thing for us to discuss as to whether, to what extent we need to continue to consider all aspects of the join process in this working group, or to what extent the ANIMA working group should do that. In the chartering of the ACE working group, we agreed that the join process would be explicitly out of scope for the ACE working group, so as to not be confused by how do we get the initial relationship in ACE. I believe that ACE will at some point have to perhaps recharter to include that. So that's just an important part, the interactions as to, you know, whether we should do something or someone else should do something, and whether something will happen. What's become clear to me in the last year is that what I thought was a clear, simple set of requirements on what the security bootstrapping needs to do is perhaps much less clear than I thought to other participants. And so I propose that within the chartering of this working group, that we actually need to actually produce a, well, we're going to unfortunately have to produce a requirements, and we're going to have to define what we mean by zero-touch join process. And I'm not going to claim one way or the other as to whether or not we should solve that problem. It may be that we will simply produce this requirements document, hand it to Anima, for instance, and say, thank you very much. Could you please, could you finish this yesterday? Thanks, right? So that's my suggestion from the chartering process, is that we should have a secure join requirements, and I believe the word zero touch needs to be in that title, and maybe we will argue over whether or not it belongs in that title, but the arguing must be in scope.
Thank you, Michael. Just to be clear on the scope, this is Thomas. What I have in mind is we need to have a secure join protocol allowing a node to join the network to send in data, but we also, in the context of centralized scheduling, need to establish a secure session between a node and the management entity. So
yes, that is a good point, and that was one of the things that we tried to place into the architecture document. That was one of the goals, was to do that. I believe that when we have a secure join process, that the secure join process will, or the requirements on the secure join process has to say what you just said. It must result in a connection to the PCE management thing, and whether the word JCE, join coordination entity, and I picked the letters to match JCE, and it was difficult to match PCE. Whether the JCE function role is contained within the PCE or is elsewhere is not in scope for us, and someone could quite easily find a way to communicate, transfer a credential or a session from A to B. But that we should separate them functionally in our heads.
And just as a clarifying question about your discussion about Anima, given that we're dealing with two things, joining and establishing a secure session, do both of these things fall within Anima?
No, the join process that we have a requirement for a join process that results in a connection to PCE. Yeah. That is our requirement. Yeah. That means that Anima must pass back to us, return from function or whatever, a thing, which I will not describe because I don't want to confuse the thing, which either is a connection to the PCE or facilitates a connection to the PCE. But I don't think we need to overspecify that point.
Okay. Thank you, Michael.
Michael Berenger, participant in Anima. So my ideal scenario is that Anima takes care of a secure bootstrap scenario. Now, as René has pointed out, I have not been very active here, which I should have been, agreed. So my mistake, and maybe that is a reason to not do it, but philosophically I still think it would be nice to have one bootstrap approach. And yes, we do need help there as well. And it's also not entirely clear because whether constrained environments are in scope or not, and right now they're not. So several obstacles, I still think that will be the right approach.
But I mean, the same way that we have started OTF in this group without being chartered, just as a preparation, I mean, some drafts could circulate in Anima explaining how you would do Anima in a constrained world. I expect that it could be acceptable for the working group to have drafts around on that.
René Struik. First to comment on Anima. I provided about 15 pages of comments before the Anima charter came along, and then the group at some point decided to remove Internet of Things as their target audience. So I'm kind of surprised here. I think we have a document right now that I discussed on Monday, which is not necessarily complete, but it's, I think, a good basis to work from and to elaborate on to get to all those wonderful scenarios that people have been discussing on the mailing list. I think it's a solid basis, and I would really like this group to continue its work in a kind of an expedient fashion.
So
I do see that there's lots of bootstrapping drafts popping up all over the place. So I think coordination is required, but coordination does not mean that you move it to some other people's plate.
okay, so your recommendation is to keep that work within 6TISCH.
Yes, and
Okay.
I think there's been progress, and there's been on some areas there have been less progress, but they will be next, right?
Okay.
We have to build up from bottom up.
Clarifying question here. Your draft is actually an excellent tool for presenting what things are, so that it can be referred in the prime statement, requirements, etc. It's not at all a solution draft, right?
Well, actually, there's a joint section in there that describes all the protocol flows in detail. It doesn't describe the format, as I said,
yes, exactly.
on Monday.
So
but it's the first stage of protocol design is to have a conceptual agreement on the flows.
That's
and
exactly,
then we can talk about the bit and byte ordering and so on, right?
That's exactly what my question is. So to which extent would you wish that we work? So for instance, what you provide is an abstraction. It's a high level that we could push to a group for the bits and bytes, or we could go further and further and further till we get all the bits and bytes. And my question to you is how far would you see this group going for this pushing, detailing your works?
I think that most of the draft, I think you had a question on Monday, how much is it tied, and Robert Grady, I think as well, how much is it tied into the Mac? Not that much, but there are some interactions that have to do with the 15.4e specific things. I think we can go all the way, and I don't mind if, and actually would favor that we would have a solution that would also fit more generally in the 6-low space. But I'm just afraid that we will create lots of delays. Let's move on, and if at some moment we decide that we should take this in a broader audience, I'm happy to do advocacy there myself, and I'm sure there's a bunch of other people in the room who do so too. Right?
And I agree with your comments. I think we have two kind of different things. We want to progress fast, and I think we have a great design team, and we're progressing well. But at the same time, we want to make sure that what we come up with is more general than 6TISCH. I mean, most of the joining is generic to constrained devices, and is not particularly special with 6TISCH.
Yeah. So totally agree.
Okay.
That's why I said basically there's a small intersection between the Mac and the layer.
Okay.
We need to move on.
Thank
to
you.
security. I mean, we have passed the time wanted to spend on security, so please.
Can I just make one comment?
Yes, please.
So this is Nancy Kamwinjit. So acting as the security advisor for Anima and I think there are points of commonality, and I think we're making that observation. So what I've observed, and I need to provide more feedback, is that there is a draft there that describes a general workflow for how we do bootstrapping. So perhaps one way to think about it is leveraging, and that was something that was asked of me from the security area directors, was to make sure that there wasn't duplicity, but perhaps what we can do is leverage from that general workflow and then show the applicability for this particular working group.
Could you send that a link to the list, to the 6TISCH?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Subir?
So quick comment from Subir Das is that having one approach for all constant device, I think is a better approach. And then for different Macs, I think for different kinds of the protocol maybe features would be different, but across all that at least in the internet area, having one approach I think makes sense. And that's I think is a good message we can provide to the industry. But I have a quick question for the scheduling part, or you want to finish?
Let's finish security. If that your comment is about security.
Actually, I have a meta comment about the timing of this process. When we set up the working group, when we chartered the working group, there were a bunch of milestones that we wanted to complete. And if you look at the current charter page, the earliest uncompleted milestone is listed at August 2014, and what we're talking about right now is listed at December of 2014. And there's a bunch of stuff in between here and there. I think that some good progress has been made on those milestones, and so my point is not, put on the brakes, but the working group does need to finish that stuff.
Yeah.
So my worry is that if you add all of this stuff to the charter right now, you're going to suck the energy out of those other efforts.
Well, it looks like this when you compare, but if you, in practice, the interface draft, the co-op draft, they are complete. We discussed that in Honolulu. The problem we have is that we don't want to ship a data model that has not been experienced enough, because we got the strong feedback from the command people that throwing an experimental data model is kind of a bad idea. So it's not that for our standpoint the work is there. It's just that we are hesitating to actually stamp it. And
okay, I mean, but for example, the minimal draft, is there a reason why that can't be submitted?
I'm sorry, did you hear?
The question was whether the minimal draft, there's a reason not to submit it. The minimal draft is finished.
Sorry?
The minimal draft is finished.
It's finished.
So, yeah,
okay.
so there's
so
no...
I mean, anything that's finished and that you don't need to hold off on for the data model reason, which I think is a really good reason.
Yeah.
You should just submit to the IESG.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
Yes, we were solving actually the last call questions like this security issue, and so we polished those words and we pushed to IESG. That's where we are.
So just a quick announcement that we have a room now for the security discussion in the evening at 7 p.m. The room is at terrace level. It's pavilion. We have announced that. So I also have a comment about doing the generic work for join. If you are planning to do that, I think let's work together with the 6th law, and not everybody in 6th law come to 6TISCH, so we make sure that it is reviewed. I cannot, I know, then it should be, we cannot enforce that. So it should be, presented and reviewed in both groups. And let's discuss it tonight and see how we can divide and conquer the work.
Thanks a lot, Samita. So there's nothing much to say about the central scheduling, but the discussion that we already had about forming DetNet. So really, any people understand who cares about the centralized scheduling, how that can be programmed, etc. How can we end up having this co-op thing filled by somebody? Well, we have a DetNet mailing list. Please join the DetNet mailing list, participate to that. If you have requirements, use cases, etc., please participate to DetNet. And as far as 6TISCH is concerned, for the time being, we can leave it at that. The distributed scheduling is probably the big and well understood item for the rechartering. We have had those OTF and 6-stop documents for almost forever, and they are stabilizing. I really think that we are in good shape for actually doing this dynamic scheduling work, and I really strongly suggest that we recharter in that direction. Any comments on that?
It's Randy Turner. I think we've done a great job in specifying a framework for delivering schedules, but it seems like the scheduling work might want to exist forever outside. I mean, we could finish and different working groups could be spun up to come up with new scheduling algorithms, and we've essentially created a framework to allow that to happen. We've plugged all the, we're trying to plug the holes in the interfaces and APIs that 15.4 didn't bother with. So we've got instrumentation, and we've essentially enabled other working groups to come up with unique algorithms and different ways to do things that wouldn't necessarily require us to stay chartered forever. So yeah, I think it could be moved outside of our working group.
That's why we want to do DetNet. I mean, basically, we see DetNet as doing that for us, but maybe for others, because it seems to be a very common problem, not just TSCH. And then let it live, right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly
And
what
yeah.
Yeah.
That's it. We from the very beginning we differentiate mechanisms of policy. We define the skeleton, and then the algorithms fall completely out of scope of this. John.
Comment. I reviewed the architecture document. I think it's a very good document and kind of put the framework for the architecture and the different scheduling options. I think it will be a good foundation for this rechartering. And for the distributed scheduling, the on-the-fly Diego just presented, I think it also kind of framework, not to specify some algorithm. I think from that aspect, I think it's good. My question actually is about the definition of here the distributed scheduling, because in the architecture we have 4 modes, like hop by hop and labor to labor. In my view, those 2 modes are distributed scheduling. But on the fly, I think it refers to labor. My question was, are we going to consider hop by hop also in this rechartering for the distributed scheduling?
I don't think so. It's neighbor-to-neighbor communication. The hop by hop, the RGP thing, is not part of this. It would be too big, I believe.
Let us see, what .NET delivers. If they deliver only the shower model, or if they propose something for the hop by hop along the path. But we're slaves to that work. So let them make progress, and maybe we can push requirements, right? I mean, the whole point here is about pushing requirements. So we can discuss if we have requirements like that, but we don't do the work so far, right? This is we want .NET to progress, and that's a different set of skills and people. So on the requirement level, we can discuss that. And
sorry. So Pascal, by saying that you meant the distributed scheduling here is not limited to the labor to labor, right?
Trouble understanding the voice.
No, in architecture we have 4 modes: neighbor to neighbor, hop by hop.
Yeah.
And in my view, those 2 are distributed scheduling.
Yeah.
So you are saying here the distributed scheduling should cover both, right? We don't limit it to either one. Yeah, I think that's my understanding, because in architecture we have those kind of modes described.
So let's move on. We just have 5 minutes for Pat.
The second comment is about here we need the centralized scheduling and distributed scheduling. I was wondering, do we need to consider the neighbor discovery also for the 6TISCH? For example, Pascal, you had a draft in the 6th law, and you presented the requirements to update the RFC 6775. In my view, the labor discovery could be also a good topic for the rechartering. For example, is there any issue of the existing labor discovery protocol when we consider 6TISCH network?
Okay, good point to make to the list. I mean, people need to understand exactly what you mean, and please describe that question on the list.
Thanks.
Thank you, Shandong. With this, Pat, if you can.
So thank you for the discussion about recharging. Thank you, Ted, for your remark. Very well noted. We'll make a nice mix of the input. Thank you.
Well, good morning again. I'm Pat Kinney, and I'd like to request a recharter for the use of the letter E, and if I could change the next one.
Sorry, Pat, a change in the current charter, right?
Yes.
Not a recharter, just a change in the current.
Oh, a change in the charter. Thank you. 15.4 right now, by the way, just as a quick one, we are revising it. There are right now 7 outstanding amendments that are actually approved, so they are part of the standard. What we're doing right now, an amendment only tells you the changes necessary for that amendment. It's almost impossible to totally understand what 15.4 is by looking at all of those. So we wrote them up into one document. We do have a document now, D5. It's only available, though, to the voting members or to participants of the meeting. Right now we're in the final stages of the letter ballot. Then we'll go into a sponsor ballot. At the sponsor ballot, then the draft will be publicly available. Okay, it's on track for an approval in December. terminologies, these are some of the changes that we've done, the terminology changes. If you got into some of the very minute details, you would have found that actually the time slot was incorrect. If you interpreted it the way it was written, it would be wrong. And I got that straightened out with Jonathan Simon. So basically, instead of saying frame, he should have said PPDU, which is, by the way, a significant difference because of the header information. Default values, we changed them just to tweak them in. We also added, though, defaults for, we call it the utility network, but basically it's for sub-gigahertz. You can now, with the new standard, use TSCH with sub-gigahertz. Before it was only usable with the legacy 2.4 gigahertz. Unfortunately, there weren't enough, the numbers weren't big enough, the slots weren't big enough, so we've now changed the time slotting information such that you can have either a 2-octet or a 3-octet number for some of them. And that really needs to be seen to basically understand. But it's backward compatible. Next. The CSMA CA flowchart was difficult to read at best, incorrect in some other areas. So what we've done is we put them all together. Obviously, then you can see the errors, and so we fixed it. There was another area too, the CCA. There was one sentence in the standard that said, you can do CCA if you want to. And that was it. So we fixed that. I'll get into this on the next one, and I already mentioned those. Next slide. Priority channel access. It's complementary to the priority of 6TOP. We have now fixed it with TSCH. It's harmonized now. And so we're going to need to work on getting the interfaces correct. But now you can have, for shared channels, you can have priority give you the advantage. And is there the next one? Okay. Security. I'm not the security guy, but a lot of changes in security. First of all, we now have state diagrams, and you can access those on that document. The second one, we've harmonized it with the key management protocol of 802.15.9. Changed it, enhanced it actually to allow frame counters on a per key basis, not on a per device basis. And this one, removing security level 4, I hope no one was using it because it's flawed tremendously. And so we just removed it rather than trying to fix it. And then we also specified how security is done on new frame types. Next slide, please. Okay, there we go. An excerpt, by the way, of the draft text. You can actually access this one freely right now. You will get the functional description. The information element constructs were inconsistent, and the security levels for the IEs are now independent of frame security level. Sometimes the IE is more or less important than the frame it's being sent as. So now you can adjust them appropriately. And also, this was a real mishmash. We had to figure out how this really was meant to work. And we also specified how security done on the frame types, which parts are encrypted, which parts are not. Renee?
So, we only have a couple of minutes left, and I'd like to make sure that we get input on your question of removing the E from the current charter.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll just finish this. We cleared this up on the 5 octet ASN. When can you do frame counter suppression? You can only do it for TSCH. That before wasn't clear. Now, obviously in this room, you're only using TSCH, so you don't care, but that was clarified. Finally, here's a schedule, but while you're looking at the schedule, basically, when you say 802.15.4e, you are referring to one document and one document only. You are referring to an amendment document. So then you get into issues of, well, that inherently is in saying, I also do 2011. Yes, but it's not written that way in the charter right now. If it was, it would have said that 802.15.4 2011 as amended by 4E. That would have been the correct way to write it. It's a lot easier just to delete the E, and that will then mean whatever the latest standard is. So no matter what, it's always going to be correct. Right now, the latest standard is 2011 as modified by 4E, 4F, 4G, and onward. So it's in the standard right now. All we have to do is delete the E, and then, by the way, anytime another group refers to a section within a document, that's not right, because we can change that even just as an errata. So you always call it a name. Don't call it a number like clause 4.5.2.3.
Yeah.
Don't do that. That's just, you're screwing everybody by doing that.
So you're suggesting to talk about the TSCH mode of 15.4.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
And I checked the current charter, and every time that it's spelled that way and it makes sense, it's actually the whole sentence is there. It's always said TSCH mode of 15.4e, right? So by erasing the E, we get TSCH mode of 15.4. There's only one reference of 15.4e, but there's no problem with just doing that. That works.
I agree.
So you have a clarifying question, Oli?
Yeah, I think 2 slides back or so. Yeah, so the third dash, security levels for information elements are now independent of frame security level. So this seems to suggest some kind of object security that you include here, or and could you just comment on what this means for the frame sizes?
So the frame sizes aren't changed.
Okay.
Are changed?
Are not changed.
So I'd like to have a quick show of hands about the change that you propose to change from. So there are questions about the changes in 15.4e. I don't think they're in scope of the 6TISCH working group, and we're out of time. But so who is objecting against changing the text from the TSCH mode of 15.4e to the TSCH mode of 15.4? If you do not agree, please raise your hand.
Yeah, can I ask a quick question?
Please.
So you mean a ratified standard, right? You don't mean draft XYZ, right?
No, it means a standard.
Yeah, because there's disclaimers in the front. You shall not trust any draft and so on, right? So yeah.
I'm not understanding your point. It only refers to a standard, though.
Okay.
Okay, Robert.
So Robert Craigie, just a clarifying question. So when we say 15.4, we mean 2011 as amended by
We mean,
EFG,
when you say
H,
15.4, and this is, by the way, for almost all SDOs, you're meaning the latest version of the standard.
with all the amendments.
Well, yes, right now it is. Now, when the new revision comes out, it'll be rolled in.
Because we get rid of this E thing. So that's important. Sorry. If we get rid of this E, then it has to be really obvious that when you say 15.4, it includes the E amendment.
Yes.
And
4E's been approved, therefore it's part of the standard.
as long as that's clear.
And then when 15.4/2015 comes out, the E will disappear. Yeah.
Good point.
Yoshiroba, can you move to the slides talking about the MTU size?
So
for TSCH, it's
I don't know where it is.
I think
so we're 4 minutes behind, so we have to cut.
I think now we support that new revision supports more than the 1,000 bytes of MTU. And if my understanding is correct, the current 6TISCH charter is based on working on MTU size of 127 or something like that.
We still need to support it. I mean, that's even if we can do better, even if we have the G5, which can do 2K, we still need to support 127. Still.
Okay, so what?
Okay. But we also support large
yes,
line.
of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's actually extending.
So
6TISCH
one
to-
follow-up questions with the PAD, the revision, right? So in this 6TISCH working group normative reference, what will be referred? Will it be referred 802.15.4 no year, or it will be referred 802.15.4 2011?
No, 15, it should refer just 15.4 with no year.
Okay, I propose that the next.
But that maybe we can offline discuss. That may create a problem.
Okay.
Because because we have to refer a specific document, right?
Okay, we have to. We're over time. I propose that we discuss this at the next interim meeting, which will be in 2 or 3 weeks, probably 3 weeks. Any other business?
Everybody signed the blue sheets?
Yes, thank you very much. We're closing the session. Thank you. Please sign the blue sheets.
Ouais, moi, il faut que j'aille au repas là.